Hi everybody and welcome to the second edition of the Alexei Sayle Podcast. Now, I think for many people, lockdown has been an opportunity to do new things, to learn new things, and certainly it's been that way for me. I've just started wild swimming. Well, I fell in the canal when I was pissed one night. But one of the things that happened when lockdown first started is I found myself, and this was almost a kind of without me intervening, I found myself reading all these different histories of the Labour Party, reading over and over about the same events, Kinnock and Militant, and going further back. And at first, I didn't really know why I was doing it, but then I realised it was because I wanted to understand what had happened with the Corbyn project. I had been so taken up. I'd always, as I said last week, despised and hated the Labour Party. I thought it was a vile organisation. And then when Jeremy came along, suddenly I was entranced, and I thought there was a possibility of change via the Labour Party. And then, of course, with the way he's being treated now, I'm back to thinking it's a fucking shitty bastard organisation. Interestingly enough, I was watching Novara Media the other day, and there was the guy on there, podcast guy on there called Michael Walker, and he was saying, this is what I was saying about the right wing of the Labour Party, how it's horrible, just apart from their politics, that they are horrible, horrible people. And he was saying he'd been on the radio that day with Margaret Hodge, right-wing Labour MP Margaret Hodge, and he just said it was kind of aside from the point that he was making, but he just said what a deeply, deeply unpleasant woman she is. Just really horrible, rude, aggressive woman. Anyway, so I'm back to hating the Labour Party, but I wanted to understand what had happened. And by reading these histories of the Labour Party, I also found out that it was not the first time, the Corbyn experiment, that it was not the first time that it had happened. That in fact, Corbyn was the third time. The first time was in 1935, and there was this guy called George Lansbury, and he was in 1935. The Labour Party performed catastrophically in the polls, and so this guy, George Lansbury, was elected leader of the party, and he was, by all accounts, I think, a wonderful man. I mean, deeply decent human being, also involved in a lot of local politics around where he lived, which was in Poplar. And in fact, they coined this phrase, Poplarism, to describe his activities, rent strikes, strikes, activities for low-paid workers and so on. Anyway, he was also, George Lansbury, a pacifist, which, you can see is a bit of a difficult sell 4 years before the start of the Second World War, but nevertheless, a deeply decent individual. And he was deposed from power entirely by the actions of the stinking right-wing parliamentarians in the Labour Party in league with the right-wing trade union leaders. The next time it happened, of course, was Michael Foot, around about 1980-odd. Michael Foot... I never really liked Michael Foot. He always seemed like a dick, really. But nevertheless, he was left-wing, and again, he was deposed by the right wing of the Labour Party, and again, that led to Neil Kinnock, and of course, Neil Kinnock led to Tony Blair. One of the things you might be wondering about, actually, is why I keep talking about the Labour Party. Well, several reasons. I think we are in... what has happened in the Labour Party has been epochal, and to see the way it's been, the purge that's going on at the moment of left-wing members is just extraordinary. The hypocrisy, the lying that is going on is profound. And the Labour Party has gone from being a party led by a good and decent man to a party being led by a tiny, tiny, tiny little man with no principles who's trying to act like a hard case. So, yes, Labour Party. But the other reason I'm going to talk about Labour Party is I have a quandary with doing this podcast, because on one level, normally in normal circumstances, I would work out new material by doing, live shows, work in progress shows at small venues, or doing book readings, and in the Q&A I develop my ideas, my thoughts, and eventually they build into comic routines. At the moment I can't do that, so I'm doing it via this podcast, developing my ideas. Now, the problem is, of course, that I don't want to, if I want these ideas to eventually boil down into killer comic bits, I don't want too many people hearing it. So if I keep talking about the Labour Party, I reckon not many people will listen, but the ones who do will be engaged. I can work out my ideas. I'll do them. I'll boil them down until they're killer bits of stand-up, and then you can listen to them on Radio 4. But also I get paid. One thing about Keir Starmer is they keep referring to him as human rights lawyer Keir Starmer. Well, I think he was a human rights lawyer for a bit, but since then, for a lot longer, he was Director of Public Prosecutions, and then an MP. It's like Hitler worked in a pub, but they don't call him bar worker. Bar worker Adolf Hitler vowed to crush the forces of the Allies as they invaded Europe. So he's not really, he was a human rights lawyer briefly, but that's not really what defined him. And I also want to talk at some point about the fact that, and it's a thing that's always fascinated me, how a lot of the most virulent forces on the right started off on the left, and whether, what the correlation there is. Why does that happen? Who are these people? And I remember there was an appalling little shit in Blair's cabinet called Dr. John Reid, and he insisted everybody called him Doctor because he'd done a PhD in hotel management from the University of South Aruba. And he'd started out, I think he'd been in the Communist Party, and of course by the end, after he left government with the traditional Blairite revolving door policy, he ended up on the board of British Aerospace. One of the world's largest arms manufacturers. Quite a journey. So is it a journey? Did he genuinely, do people who go from the left to the right, is that a journey? Or do they just go from being one kind of shit to another kind of shit? I'm not sure, but at some point I'd like to get into that in more detail, what the motivation for those people are. Another opportunity that lockdown has provided for me is that I can practice my martial arts more. I am a student of Chinese martial arts. One of the things that always amazes me, when you tell somebody, a lot of people, that you do kung fu, immediately they make this stupid noise. They go, ah, and then they make these idiotic hand choppy gestures. And I think, mate, you are taking the piss out of somebody who you know can kill you. So you're taking the piss. You are deriding something that is really important to somebody who spends hours and hours studying that thing, who you don't know that they can't reach into your chest and pull your heart out without you noticing. And yet you insist on going, ah, and making stupid hand choppy gestures and mentioning the single kung fu fighting. Arseholes. A while back before lockdown, our chief instructor and my teacher was talking to us about the hierarchy in Chinese Kung Fu, the hierarchy of attainment. And he said that the kind of hierarchy of heroes, of people in Kung Fu, it starts, it obviously goes student, first of all, then teacher, then master, then warrior, I think then magician. But he said at the very pinnacle of Kung Fu, of Chinese Kung Fu, is a character solely referred to as the mysterious old man. The mysterious old man. And he said the mysterious old man, he's somebody who, he might disappear for years, he might come back, he might teach, he might defend a village from rapacious warlords, and then when you look around, he's gone. This is the mysterious old man, but his kung fu is so profound, his understanding of the world, his wisdom is so deep that he has almost magical powers. And I wondered for a bit whether Jeremy Corbyn wasn't our mysterious old man. And maybe he is, but clearly with what's happening to him in the Labour Party is not the organisation where he needs to end up. But maybe that's what Jeremy is and also I don't think it's a coincidence that Jeremy Corbyn has the same initials as Jesus Christ. Is that it? Is that it? Actually, talking about conspiracy theories, there is obviously there's been all talk this week of vaccines. And my wife Linda said to me, "Did you think this Pfizer vaccine? Will you take it?" I said, "Yeah." So I'm going to take all of them. I'm going to have like the Pfizer one, then I'm going to have the AstraZeneca one, then I'm going to have is it Monsanto or whoever? I'm going to have their one. I mean, if Aldi start doing a vaccine, I'm going to have that, man. If my local tattoo parlor starts brewing up a vaccine in the back room, I'm going to have that. And I think, I assume that they will be safe. The only real impetus to hope, in a sense, that the vaccine might not be safe is I read somewhere that next week Piers Morgan and Matt Hancock are on Good Morning Television going to be taking together the Pfizer vaccine. And you kind of hope in a way that, like they take the vaccine and then their faces start to melt. Like in the final scene of Indiana Jones, the first Indiana Jones film. And I kind of I would put up, if that happened, if they took the vaccine and then their faces started to fall out and their eyeballs exploded, I'd kind of put up with, another year of lockdown if I could see that. Probably won't happen, but, a girl can hope. So, yeah, Jeremy Corbyn. Maybe Jeremy is leading us on a journey where he shows us that we have to go through the Labour Party and then we have to found our own party. Now, in the past, clearly the left has not been great at. There is no socialist party. There is no equivalent in Britain of Podemos or other left parties in Europe. That you're just being stuck with. The socialists have been stuck with the stinking Labour Party. And in the past, it's clearly not being popular. You've had other parties. People have attempted to set up other socialist parties in Britain, but often they've been led by these kind of charismatic figures, people like Arthur Scargill or George Galloway. And I think if you're gonna found a socialist party, then one of the things that you mustn't have is those strong leaders. That there's got to be some kind of rotating democracy or something. That the hard man leader is definitely not the way to go. Also, I remember I was talking last week about being a Maoist, and that our party, the Communist Party of Britain (Marxist-Leninist), was led by this kind of similarly a charismatic ex-Labour Party, ex-Communist Party, trade union official called Reg Birch, and he was very he's very charismatic, Reg Birch. And I also talked last week about going on delegations to, if you were high up in the party, I never was, but you would go on delegations to Albania and to China. And I remember Roy Greenslade, who I think later became the editor of the Daily Mirror. He was also a member of the CPBML, and he went he was sent on a delegation, and he went to he was talking to some building workers in Shanghai in Maoist China, and they said to him, he mentioned he was from the CPBML, and they said, "Oh yes, we know Reg Birch. He will be your prime minister after the British have their revolution." Like, these people didn't know who the Beatles were. They didn't know who Elvis was. They didn't know, they didn't know anything, but they knew who Reg Birch was, and that once we had our revolution, he would be our prime minister. Anyway, that's by the by. But I think the left's predilection for these kind of charismatic individuals would be a mistake. Secondly, strategy. As I said before, I studied Chinese martial arts, and when you study Chinese martial arts, one of the books that you study is Sun Tzu's Art of War. Now, reading Sun Tzu's Art of War, or the lessons that he teaches, it seems to me that the left in Britain, every lesson that Sun Tzu has ever taught, the left has done the opposite. I mean, you take like the anti-Semitism hoo-ha, the left has fought that battle, the Labour Party has fought that battle on a battlefield of their enemies, choosing that they have always allowed their enemy to dictate the territory on which they fight. Similarly, I think one of the lessons that Sun Tzu talks about is that you cannot fight effectively with wishful thinking. And I think, unfortunately, wishful thinking is a part of, I mean, maybe in a sense, wishful thinking is part of being a socialist because, you are thinking that humanity is essentially good, and that is perhaps wishful thinking. But nevertheless, we have to eschew wishful thinking if we are ever going to be effective. Also, I think we have to be more focused. I'm going to read an extract. As well as reading histories of the Labour Party, I found myself reading Tony Benn's diaries. Tony Benn, again, is somebody that I have ambiguous feelings about, but this is a description I will read out to you from Tony Benn's diaries about the 11th of September 2001. I was asked to do a few broadcasts for local radio about it. The events of that day, obviously. And then I went off for the monthly Labour Action for Peace meeting in the centre of London. There were a lot of old comrades. Beryl Huffingly, Walter Wolfgang, Nicholas Russell, who's the youngest, Jim Addington, and so on. The incredible thing was, although they all knew what had happened, they spent about an hour discussing who'd got the leaflets for the forthcoming conference, who was doing the collection, was the pamphlet ready, had the room been booked. My mobile phone kept ringing, but I couldn't hear anything because the meeting was in a basement. So I said to them, "Look, I've got to go, but don't you think we ought to have a word about this attack?" So we did have a bit of a discussion. I rushed home and found many messages asking for my comments. He's a decent... Walter Wolfgang, for instance, I think Holocaust survivor, brave individual. And yet these people on September the 11th talked about some fucking pamphlet they were going to put out. And that has always seemed to me to be that kind of tunnel vision has always seemed to be one of the infuriating things about the left. And that's one of the things, if you're going to have a socialist party, you really you've got to avoid that and be much more focused. And I think part of that is having young people involved, I think. Also, I think in terms of, and this is, I'm just, I'm just spitballing here in my living room. So, the name of the party. I think obviously the left has sometimes been addicted to those. It was almost kind of 19th century ways of thinking and talking. Those slogans like "the workers united will always be defeated." And so I think we have to find a new... I'd really like... I know there's a party, I don't know if they're left-wing or not, but there's a party in Italy called Sardines. And there's obviously Podemos, We Can, in Spain. And on the right, there's Ciudadanos, Citizens, Vox, Voice. So I think we should go... this new socialist party I've envisaging, given that I've talked a lot about how horrible people on the right are, I think our socialist party should be called the Nice People, or the Nice People Party. But I think the Nice People. What do you think? Because we are nice people. We're typified as being horrible people, and that's a tactic, isn't it? It's there was a tactician that George Bush had called Karl Rove, and he said what you should do is attack people not on their weaknesses, attack them on their strengths. And that's how Corbyn, a lifelong anti-racist, came to be called by people who are themselves racist. He came to be called a racist. So I think that's what we have to major on, is the fact that what I'm saying is that you could just say that anybody on the right who criticises you, you say they're a horrible person, and we're the nice people. Have I gone mad? So these are just some thoughts I'm having about. I don't know why anybody on the left stays and thinks that the Labour Party can help them. I think that the time is now. Before, I think, when people have tried to found socialist parties, there's been, they've not had many members, but it seems to me there is 100,000, 200,000 people who are inspired by Corbyn, who now hate what Keir Starmer is about, have left the Labour Party, have let their subs lapse, and are looking for a new home. And I think for the first time that something is different, for the first time there is the possibility of a mass membership socialist party in Britain. There's never been that chance before. There's a chance now, but it has to be seized pretty rapidly, I think. So that's it for this week. Actually, Talal was just talking about how a lot of his friends, he gets annoyed because a lot of his friends are being overcome with conspiracy theories, and they're talking about, not wearing masks and stuff like that. Now, I think in this case, wearing a mask, it's a socialist thing to do. You should go along. There is no conspiracy there. Wearing a mask, conforming to these regulations is the right thing to do in this. I mean, admittedly, a lot of the restrictions do seem stupid. I mean, this idea that 3 people can gather together in a pub as long as one of them has got an ostrich with them, I mean, that is crazy stuff. I agree, but I think by and large, we need to go along with it. That's it for my the freeform part of this show for this week. But I am also, I asked you to send in some emails, and my email address is AlexeiSaylePodcast @gmail.com. And even though it was only week 1, we've had some interesting emails, and so I'm going to read them out. I won't give you the title of this one yet, but it'll be in the body of the email. Hi, Alexei. Some time ago, my then 11-year-old daughter came home from a day out at an organic woodland and told me that she had attended a cunt workshop. Being an unsophisticated man, struggling to keep a straight face, I asked my wife what sort of workshop it had really been. It was, in fact, a cunt workshop, where they had made felt cunts, spoke about reclaiming the word, and taught the attendees that it should not be used as a term of abuse, but should be used proudly by women as the only word to accurately describe the entire pubic region and sexual organs in one. I understand this and am sympathetic to the idea. However, upon listening to your first podcast a couple of times, I could not, try as I might, think of another word which could have been used to finish your sentence describing Tom Watson. I see Mr. Watson's smug, traitorous, self-satisfied face in my mind's eye, and no other word will come to mind. Am I wrong? Could such a useful word be replaced? Yeah, this is a debate, that is as old as the dawn. That's from Stephen Martinez, and then it is a debate that is as old, certainly, as the birth of alternative comedy. That there were 2 factions in the alternative comedy movement, which were pro-contists and anti-contists, and I actually, in the end, I came down on the side of the pro-contists. But I understand it is a debate that is ongoing, really. Hello, Alexei. Really enjoyed your first podcast and fully concur with your analysis of Starmer, Watson, Koonsberg and co. But I'd be interested in your thoughts on the hammering Corbyn took from your fellow comedians, many of whom purport to be on the left or at least of a liberal bent. And this is from Mark Farnham. Yeah, thank you, Mark, for that. And I think I will. It's hard, actually, in a way, for me to formulate my thoughts about that whole subject. But it's certainly true that apart from me, really, and the late Jeremy Hardy, there were very few comedians who came out and spoke for Jeremy Corbyn. There's a video I think that I did for Just Use where I say that if you are anti-establishment, then Jeremy Corbyn is the epitome, and that is the sacred role of the comedian, is to be anti-establishment. I mean, it's a hackneyed phrase, that talking truth to power. I mean, I talk Spanish to geese, but it's just a thing I do. It's not a phrase I like, really. But nevertheless, I think that is the sacred role of the comedian, and it is a role that comedians very much failed to live up to in the last 5 years. And yeah, I think I will, when I try and formulate my thoughts more clearly, but I will come back to that subject. Yeah, and I think that most comedians were despicable. The last 5 years, their behaviour has been extraordinarily cowardly. On the other hand, whether that, we are living in, I never thought I would live through times when you could not speak your mind when it could cost you your career, I think, to speak your mind. And so maybe their timidity is justified. But I will return to that subject. Thank you, Mark. Hi, Alexei. Loving the show so far. So glad you finally plunged headfirst into the world of podcasting. Wonder if you could please tell us your memories of that fantastic series, which sadly seems more relevant than ever, Whoop's Apocalypse, and its spin-off film of the same name. All the best and stay safe, Jonathan. Well, again, Jonathan, thank you for that email. And Whoop's Apocalypse. Again, I think that is a really interesting subject that I would return to. Funnily enough, I was talking to somebody about a younger person who had no idea. This was a prime time ITV series about nuclear war, written by David Rennick and Andrew Marshall, two of who would go on to write for me on my series stuff. And obviously, of course, David Rennick also was the writer of One Foot in the Grave and Jonathan Creek, and Andrew Marshall was the writer of 2.4, Children and Dad, all hit sitcoms. So again, I think I would be happy. I love talking about my past. It's really what I cling on to. So I will. Let's have an edition of the podcast where I talk about Whoop's Apocalypse, I think, and the radically different landscape that TV comedy was in the 1980s. Really, for me, that would be interesting. For you, well, I don't care. No, I do care. I don't care. I care a bit. I care somewhat, but like not completely. Well, I care I care about if I had a yogurt in the fridge and I took it out and it got mouldy. I care. No, that's dismissive. I care more than that. So this podcast is also on my YouTube channel, which is simply called Alexei Sayle. Is that right? It's called Alexei Sayle. And we've also had some lovely comments on YouTube. And this one is apparently for somebody called Hong Sing Choi Lee Few Lady, which is, I don't know what that means. That's her name. And she says, I've been boycotting the BBC completely since the general election a year ago and thought it meant I wouldn't get any content from you, Alexei. Very pleased you're doing this. Thank you for that. I'm glad that I can. Again, this is another interesting subject for a podcast, is the nature of the BBC. And I understand, I read, I think in The Guardian, another stinking establishment organ, but I read that trust, maybe it wasn't in The Guardian, the trust in the BBC has fallen greatly in the last few years, I think. But I have worked all my life for the BBC, all my best work, my best media work. I continue, obviously, to work for Radio 4, and I think their wonderful head of comedy, Sean Ed William, is an example of somebody who really cares about talent and cares about comedy. So I understand why people would want to boycott the BBC. I actually think it's not the BBC as a monolithic organisation. It is those bastards in news and current affairs who have really let us down. Almost universally staffed. I think it was the Today programme was edited by Robbie Gibb, who used to go on his holidays with David Cameron. Can you imagine if the BBC was if a major programme on the BBC was edited by somebody who used to go on their holidays with Jeremy Corbyn? Highly unlikely. So I think in many ways it is news and current affairs that has been completely captured by the right wing. So the BBC is not a monolithic organisation. It is a kind of federation of competing interests. Nevertheless, I think it might be another topic that we could go into. What is the BBC? Should you stick with it, or should you, I understand why people want to boycott it. But then you miss out on hearing me. Not just my imaginary sandwich bar, but also my series coming in March next year, Sex Series 2 of The Absence of Normal. I mean, you're cutting off your nose to spite your foot, aren't you there? I was going to say dick. I was going to make the inevitable dick joke there, but I restrained myself. Speaking of the YouTube channel, there is also Alexei Sayle's Lockdown Bike Ride, which is up there on my on my YouTube channel. So that's a more kind of gentle, more reflective side of Alexei, because I have many facets. So yeah, if you fancy it, it's me basically riding around town on my bike. Check that out. Thanks for listening. See you next time. The Alexei Sayle Podcast was written by me and produced and edited by Talal Karkouti. Music by Tarboosh Records. Thanks to Audio Boom for hosting us. Please make sure to subscribe. And hey, why not leave us a review? If it's really interesting, then I'll read it out on the show. All right, bye-bye. See you next time.